I'm not going to read, unless you want me to, I'm not really going to read about the straight takeover. That was from 1968, when we know all hell is breaking loose. Straight takeover, it's long and there's just so much to it. But I thought I'd read you something most people might not have really heard of, but it was very big in my memory. And this is from my junior year, spring 1969. And what's happening is a campus publication has recently compared the racial situation in the US to apartheid in South Africa. And the Interfraternity Council, the IFC, is holding a 4-day symposium on South Africa. And SDS, Students for Democratic Society, which was the main sort of radical organization on campus, they're mad that most of the revolutionaries, they have invited the revolutionaries from South Africa, but they're speaking on a panel to be held on Saturday morning. A special panel focusing on Black African concerns is to be held on Thursday afternoon, but at the Friday afternoon panel on February 28th, the Afro-American Society and SDS members demand that President Perkins explain why the trustees have not divested university stock in banks that lend money in South Africa. President Perkins declines to comment. A Black graduate student says, "Perkins answers these questions or no more questions take place." Perkins does not answer the questions. No more questions take place. That evening, not knowing that had transpired, but that evening I go to hear Allard Lowenstein, he's the new congressman from Long Island, New York, speak about change in South Africa. Lowenstein has spent time in South Africa and wrote a book about the government there. He also started the Dump Johnson movement and persuaded Eugene McCarthy, and I had worked for McCarthy over the summer, to run for president. By the time I arrive, the auditorium is packed with people and it's dark, but the stage is brightly lit. From my seat in the middle of the hall, I can see President Perkins, Lowenstein, other speakers, and several students. They're sitting on a long table toward the rear of the stage. And 2 Black men, they're standing on either side of the stage toward the front, and they're facing one another. It'd be like, here's the podium, and they're standing there. The man to the far left is holding a long wooden plank upright, away from his body, with one end on the floor. I'm wondering what's going on when a Black student, and I'm using now Black student because we've progressed another year, and that the terminology has now changed in the Sun at least. But a Black student who's been sitting next to President Perkins walks up to the lectern at the center of the stage. He takes the microphone and says, "The peculiar thing about this whole damn symposium is it's stacked. We deal with Perkins. If he don't deal with us, we do our thing." And it's hard to hear what he's saying, and actually this is what I took this really from the Sun, but people in the audience are puzzled, they're murmuring. President Perkins, he's stout, he's gray, he's got thinning hair, dressed in a gray suit and tie, makes his way toward the lectern. The student calls Bruce Dancis, he's the guy who burned his draft card my freshman year, and he's an SDS officer, calls him to the stage, and Dancis walks up the steps to the left and joins the student at the lectern, and now Perkins is also standing at the lectern. And Dancis tells the audience that SDS and AAS object to the university's policy on South Africa, and that some Cornell trustees have personal financial interests there. He tells Perkins, "I want you to explain to the audience the university investments and defend them." Perkins takes the mic and he says, "I doubt if I'll satisfy you, but I will do my best." Dancis and a student walk off the stage. The 2 Black men are still standing guard on either side of it. Perkins says that the trustees' investment committee tries to maximize returns on investment money. From somewhere behind me in the audience, bongo drums begin to beat, and this I really did remember. Perkins says that the board generally acts without reference to campus or social policies. The drums beat faster, louder. The guard at the right side of the stage walks to the lectern, grabs Perkins' shoulder with his right hand and the microphone with his left, and the drum beats soften, slow, they slow down. The guard starts to talk, but I can't hear what he's saying. Perkins stands there and he's mute. The audience boos. Someone yells, "You just blew it." Does he mean Perkins, the guard? The guard grabs Perkins' collar from behind, and then the drum beats go louder and faster. The guard with the plank is still standing stage left. Proctor George, the supervisor of public safety, tries to climb up the steps onto the stage. The guard lifts the plank and points it at the proctor's head to keep him back. Beating, beating, beating. The other guard, still holding Perkins by the scruff of the neck, he's holding him by the scruff of the neck, and he starts walking him to the left of the stage, and they take a few steps, and the man lets go, and Perkins hurries off the stage, and then the drum beats kind of slow down and stop, and the audience is horrified. I'm gasping in shock and disbelief. These kids have just strong-armed the president of the university and marched him off the stage in front of hundreds of people. One of the South African liberation leaders walks from the table at the rear of the stage to the lectern. "I feel very highly moved because I feel President Perkins should have finished his statement tonight," he says. People applaud, and I join them in a standing ovation. When we sit down, the leader adds, "What happened tonight is against all principles of what we black people in South Africa believe in." But still, he says, he's critical of Perkins and the trustees. Douglas B. Ashford, director of the Cornell Center for International Studies, which sponsored the symposium, speaks next. He says he's terribly humiliated to see the same kind of terror that goes on in South Africa take place on a stage at Cornell University. Finally, Lowenstein steps up to the lectern. He says that under these conditions, it's rationally impossible to discuss South Africa, and the moderator adjourns the event. And anyway, what happens is the Sun then, the police identify the people who did this, and people, the AAS says it had planned the beating of the drums, but it didn't plan to have him marched off the stage. But then it turns out, 10 days later, on Monday, March 10th, Ed Zuckerman reports in the Sun that in the last year and a half, Cornell has disposed of its holding in 11 banks, including 5 from a consortium with financial interests in South Africa, and that the university doesn't even own the stocks that the president has been publicly defending. Perkins is quoted as saying he didn't know the stock had been sold until the Friday after the symposium, because the university treasurer had been away on his honeymoon. You know that? Yes, had been away. So the whole thing was just like, and then, so that was just, to me, that was just such a dramatic event. And I certainly didn't remember what you remember about it being kind of moot in its way, but this was just all kind of part of the build-up to the straight takeover in the spring of '69.